This morning, we're so excited to discuss a truly regenerative movement that's been growing around the world since 2005, and it's finally beginning to take hold in the US. So mini forest or microforest or tiny forest, all these names are used, can have a powerful cooling effect right where they are, especially in cities. Now, this picture is New Jersey's first mini forest. It was planted in December 2021 by Groundwork Elizabeth. It's located directly behind the Elmora branch of the Elizabeth Public Library. And you can see Pranita, who's on this call, surrounded by young saplings. And you can see that it's a young forest, but it's very dense, and you will soon not be able to walk through it. So what's important to know is what these mini forests are not. This is not a grove of similar trees, such as a birch plantation. It's not a woodlot that you can kind of stroll through and picnic in. It's not a clump of trees that we see in Newark's parks, beautiful clumps and lines of trees. And it's also not the general forest canopy of Newark that foresters assess, or all of our towns and cities. Instead, a mini forest is a super dense planting of highly diverse native saplings in very rich soil in an area that can be as small as half a city lot or even smaller. And this dense planting grows quickly into a multi-layered forest in 10 to 20 years rather than 80 to 100 years. So it's really, for the length of time a mature forest takes, it's an astonishing technique that's been developed. So next slide. I'm going to toss a quick question to Marian. What are the benefits of the Mayawaki style forest? Mayawaki is the biologist who developed it. And why do they grow so quickly?
Okay, so there are multiple benefits to these forests. First of all, as Susan said, trees have a cooling effect on the area where you plant them. So this is true of street trees, but it's especially true in a forest. The other thing is, when it rains, the presence of the canopy slows down the amount of water that is hitting the ground. So it's a way of preventing flooding. It's a way that the rain that does fall comes down gently, so it gets to sink into the ground and recover the groundwater. It's also a place of beauty in a neighborhood where people can just enjoy a green space. The trees grow very densely, and the reason they grow so fast is that they're actually competing with each other for light. And so they grow tall to get to the light. They share nutrients underground. They're so close together that their roots interact. And so they're much more stable in terms of not falling over during a storm, because they can support each other underground. So there are lots of good reasons for planting trees together and making a little forest ecosystem, a kind of a patch of forest inside the city. They also provide habitat for butterflies, which are essential food for young birds. So baby birds cannot eat from a bird feeder. They aren't strong enough to crack those seeds. So baby birds require thousands of caterpillars in order for a nest of birds to actually fledge and fly away. And trees are the major place where these caterpillars form. Now, sometimes that causes a problem if we're talking about gypsy moths and other kinds of caterpillars, but most trees are able to support the growth of these caterpillars, and the birds are there to peck them off. And so we don't even notice that this process is happening. The other thing about these microforests is that they could be affiliated with a school. And so students would learn about the ecology of the forest. They could become the forest rangers, not the same rangers that United Parks has. These are the junior rangers. They can give tours of the forest. It really can become a community asset.
So how does a vacant city lot host a microforest? Now, this planting area might be 10 or 12 parking spaces. It's 1,200 square feet. Now, nearby, there has to be a water source. You have to be able to get trucks right on close in. In this case, excavation was needed. The DPW is removing 18 inches of degraded soil and replacing it with 18 inches of organically rich, fertile soil. So obviously, this brings up questions of cost and where does this come from and how does it happen? But if all the factors work together and a city wants to do it for the health benefits, then the DPW is happy to get their excavating going because this is what they do. They do it well. It happens in one day. And then they replace the bad soil with a pile of really rich soil that you can see in the foreground. That becomes really key for a forest to thrive. So the next slide, so far we've noted the 5 characteristics of microforest, and I'll just go over again because it just takes a while to kind of get in my mind. So they're fast growing, they're very densely planted, so dense that foresters will say, no, you can't do that. Well, you can do it. They're diverse species, many species, sometimes 20 and 30. They are all native trees and shrubs, and it's in enriched soil. So that's the 5 majors. But there's a 6th thing is fencing. And it really depends from place to place if you have to have fencing to protect from. But these are very young trees and plants that can be eaten by all sorts of wildlife and can be pulled up. So you have to be careful. But what really makes a mini forest project successful is people. One needs an army of volunteer planters, weeders, waterers to nurture it. But just over the first 3 years, once it's established, these are native plants, so nature does all the work. And then it becomes a place for education and programming and forest rangers, as Marian mentioned, classes, workshops, craft sales, they can all happen in the cool right next to the forest. So let's imagine this November 2023 or next spring 2024, it's planting day in Newark. And volunteers are planting 20, 30 species. They'll all grow at different speeds to different heights. All of those trees have to be sourced. That's another question from DEP, Garden Center. We can talk, you can ask, questions. There's many things to answer with this, but we'll power through. So next slide. This is Dennehy Park, Cambridge. On the left, you see the planting area. Once it's all been prepared, they decided to do it in a circle. They can be any shape or, symbolism you want. And on the right is growth after just 1 year. You can see that thing really growing and really dense. The site is 4,300 square feet. That's pretty big. It contains 67 species of 1,400 trees and shrubs. There are a lot of saplings and shrubs there. And again, how is it maintained? Well, there's watering and weeding for the first 3 years. After that, it's completely self-sustaining. And what's most amazing is that the natural slow succession of a regular forest that normally would take 80 to 100 years is accelerated because of all these diverse species being grown together. The pioneer species, the climax species, the shrubs, it's all happening as if a forest already exists. So next slide, we have a cartoon that Marian's going to talk about that shows the relative height of people and trees. So it's not like you instantly have a tall tree, but here you go, Marian.
Okay, so on the left, you see that's planting day and the trees are knee high. And after a few years, some of the trees begin to grow up taller than you would be, but some of the trees that are slow growing are still pretty small. So there are trees that are canopy trees that eventually, like an oak, will get to be 50 feet high, but that's going to take 15 to 20 years. So the forest grows gradually, and it's not as though you have to deal with an instant forest. You've got 15 or 20 years to figure out how you want this forest to become part of the community. So the first year you plant it, after about 5 years, you've got a noticeable forest that is actually taller than the people that are in it. And then finally, after 15 or 20 years, these begin to look like what we consider a mature forest.
So the next slide is this mini forest was planted on a college campus in front of an academic building. As you can see, this is at Mercyhurst College in Erie, Pennsylvania. And here you can see that the young trees are protected from deer and rabbits with plastic tubes. And if you look closely, you can see that some of those trees doubled in height in the first year, and you can see them popping out of the tubes just after 1 year. It's just quite amazing. So the next slide is Summit's tiny forest. This is the third forest. We have 3 in Union County. So we want New Jersey to be a leader and get going. Summit's, in addition to the 2 Elizabeth microforests, Summit's tiny forest, it's called Tiny Forest, was planted February to April 2022. And this is a 1/4 acre, not so tiny. This forest is 11,000 square feet. It has over 600 plantings, 45 different species. The project manager in Summit is Donna Gagan Patel. She's an attorney by training. She's the chair of the Summit Environmental Commission. She's a member of Rotary. She's teaching the Rotarians about it. But what I love, you can see the walking path through the future forest. So this is a project that's a civic project. These are not projects that are on private properties. These are city projects where you really collectively envision the benefits to future generations. And you need to walk through it because the rest of the forest is going to be too dense to walk through. And with that, I just want to give a very warm cheer to Marian Glenn, because she was the initiator for the summit. She was the researcher, the tree expert, the chief planter, and the creative driver of this project. And it pulled in a lot of people. And Marian, I think you must be just very proud to see how it's coming along 2.5 years later.
It's very exciting to see it. Even though I no longer live in Summit, I felt like I turned it over to a wonderful group of active volunteers who have been weeding and watering. And there is a lot of work the first 3 years to get it established. And we're coming up on that 3rd year now. So I've been commuting back and forth because it's just so exciting to see. But I think I've got to hand it to Donna and her crew, who have really kept it going.
And also the reason we chose, Carla, the image for the front for this, you might wonder, why was there a picture of Susan Hairston? It just shows the relationships that have to be involved in order for a mini forest to happen, because it is complicated and you do have to source a lot of things. So in that picture, Susan was making a proclamation as pro tem mayor of Summit. And then the chief forester, Summit's forester, John Linson, was there. And John Linson will tell you that he was a skeptic. Now he is a total convert, because this is a space of all native, protected, fast growing trees. He doesn't have to worry about it. Nature's taking over. It's just a wonderful thing. So it's very interesting to see how it changes. But that top city level does have to give the go ahead, and chances are any mini forest will be on public. It needs to be on public land. There has to be a land swap, or it has to already be there. So next slide shows Akihiro Mayawaki, the wonderful visionary botanist, Japanese botanist, who researched and perfected this method. He planted just thousands of trees, thousands of forests over many decades, from the early 1970s to 2000. You might wonder why we don't know about him. That's another question. I'd love to have that discussion sometime. I've thought a lot about it, but there is a wonderful, good, short paperback book called The Mini Forest Revolution by Hannah Lewis. It was just written a year ago, and it provides so many inspiring stories of microforests literally restoring ecosystems all over the world, especially dramatic stories about what they do in dry places. You just cannot believe it. They restore the aquifer, it goes back up. There's then a water system happening. The trees transpire, they create humidity, and it's just unbelievable. It's just totally inspiring. So we are motivated by Mayor Baraka's pledge to plant 1 million trees in Newark. And now that Newark, Orange, Irvington, South Orange, Maplewood are all one legislative district, we think a pilot planting of several microforests, well-chosen sites, blessed by city leaders in Newark, would set a powerful example for surrounding communities. And Newark's forest leadership would really be a very welcome response to the increasingly dangerous impacts of warming temperatures that we are experiencing and certainly reading about every day. So we want to thank you, Marian, thank you all for joining us on this learning journey, and thank you for all of your creative activation in Newark's public parks. And we would love to have a conversation. We welcome your questions, thoughts, and comments. So thank you so much.